Chapter 11. Return to the Land of the Living. I didn't get a chance to spend time with Megan after breakfast because as soon as I finished and rose from the table, Miss Clenchner approached me to tell me that Dr. Sotheby was waiting for me. Megan seized my wrist as I turned to follow Miss Clenchner out of the cafeteria. "He's the worst," she whispered, "because he's young and unmarried. Watch yourself." I nodded as if to thank her for the warning, and she relaxed her grip on me so I could walk after Miss Clenchner. We went right and down the corridor to an office on the left. A pleasant-looking, dark-haired woman of no more than 40 looked up from her desk and smiled as we entered. She wore a dark green dress and had a pretty pearl earrings that matched a pearl necklace on a gold chain. She looked perfectly put together as a mannequin in a showcase window. Not a strand of her hair was out of place, but she had a warmth to her smile that made me feel welcome. "Mrs. Broadhaven, this is our new patient," Mrs. Clenchner declared. "Yes, Dr. Sotheby's waiting to see you, Laura," she said to me and rose from her desk. Despite Megan's warning, I was eager to meet the doctor, eager to find out what was wrong with me and finally be cured. "When you're finished here, maybe Mrs. Broadhaven will show you around the clinic," Mrs. Clenchner said, nodding at Dr. Sotheby's secretary. Mrs. Clenchner's tone made it clear it wasn't a request as much as an order. "I'd be happy to," Mrs. Broadhaven said, apparently not bothered by the sharpness in Miss Clenchner's voice. She went to the door to the inner office, smiling at me as she turned and waited. I took a deep breath and followed her. Hopefully the answers to all my questions and the light to wash away the darkness lie behind that office door. "This is our new patient, Dr. Sotheby," she announced as soon as she stepped in. Even though Megan had warned me, I was rather surprised at how young the doctor looked. He rose immediately from behind his dark cherry wood desk, a desk so large it looked like it was wrapped around him. Everything on it was neatly organized with folders in a neat pile and an open pad before him. On the wall behind him hung a framed diploma and awards. There were 2 large windows behind his desk that looked out on the grounds. I saw the weeping willow trees that I had seen silhouetted in the dark the night before. Everything looked green and plush today. "Good morning, Dr. Sotheby said. Please come right in." His voice was deeper than I would have expected, and he had a southern accent. His light brown hair was trimmed short at the sides, but a small pompadour in the front. "Please," he said quickly, nodding at the chair in front of his desk. "Make yourself comfortable." "Thank you, Mrs. Broadhaven," he told his secretary. She gave me a smile of reassurance and left, closing the door softly behind her. Dr. Sotheby turned back to me. He had turquoise eyes that radiated a warmth and friendliness that immediately put me at ease. His smile brightened them even more. Not a very tall man, perhaps only 5'10", he nevertheless projected a strong, firm demeanor, with his shoulders back and his handshake assertive, definite. He had a firm, straight mouth and a taut jawline. His dark gray suit and light blue shirt and matching tie with a jeweled tie clip. He appeared very distinguished and confident despite of his youthful look. He returned to his chair behind his desk. "Did you get some rest last night?" he asked. I always find it hard to sleep well in a new place myself. "I was so exhausted I didn't have time to think about it," I said, and he laughed. Most likely, he said. "Well, let me introduce myself properly." He leaned back in his chair and pressed the tips of his fingers together. "I'm Dr. Henry Sotheby. I'll be in charge of your case." He spoke calmly, relaxed, while I felt like butterflies with their wings were on fire circling madly in my stomach. I could barely sit still. What is my case? Why am I here? What happened to me? Why can't I remember the simplest things about myself? I blurted out all at once. I couldn't even remember my real name. I still can't remember my surname. The high notes of hysteria in my voice didn't seem to faze him. He simply nodded gently. I can understand your anxiety, he said, and I want to put you at ease as quickly as I can. They say you'll recover faster. It would be best, he continued, if you remember things on your own. My simply filling up the empty spaces won't be enough. For one, you might reject the information again, and then we could be worse off than we are now. Reject the information? I don't understand, I said, shaking my head. The calmer he was, the more anxious I felt. Why did I reject such important information about myself? My name, my family, where I live? It's terrifying. Am I crazy? Is that why I'm here? What's wrong with me? I pursued, my voice so shrill it hurt my own ears. I assure you that what's wrong with you at the moment won't last. And once you're cured, there's very little chance that this will happen again, he replied in a mellow voice. It didn't satisfy me, however. What will not happen? What do I have, a disease? What? I asked. He couldn't talk fast enough for me. From what I understand about your situation, I feel safe in a preliminary diagnosis of psychogenic amnesia, he said, although he looked uncomfortable about committing himself so quickly. I know what amnesia is, I said, shaking my head, but the other word, psychogenic, simply means your amnesia probably wasn't due to an organic mental disorder. There's no physical reason for you to be unable to remember things. You didn't suffer an injury to your brain, physical injury, that is. There are no drugs or alcohol involved, and you're not epileptic, and, he said with a smile, you're not pretending to be forgetful. What happened then? What's the cause of this? What happened to you? Have experienced a very traumatic event, an event of such emotional and psychological magnitude that your brain has shut down its memory chambers to prevent you from suffering, he said softly, leaning over his desk toward me. It's really a self-defense mechanism the mind employs, and it's not uncommon in situations such as yours. The trauma arose from an event that overwhelmed your coping mechanism. Another term for this today is dissociative amnesia, the inability to recall important personal information. What was it? I asked, my heart pounding. What was the traumatic event? It's important that you remember that on your own, Laura, he said. Laura? But Laura what? What's my full name? I demanded. Tell me. He nodded. Your full name is Laura Logan, he said. Then he stared at me for a moment. What does that do for you, hearing your full name? Do you remember any more about yourself? Close your eyes and repeat your name. Go on, he urged. I did so, and I shook my head. I don't remember anything, I wailed. I can't, I cried more desperately. You will, he promised me. It'll take you back gradually until it all rushes into your consciousness again. If you're just patient. And I shook my head. I can't stand it, I cried. I look in the mirror, and I feel like I'm looking at someone else. It's horrible. I'm walking around on pins and needles. My head keeps echoing with questions over and over. And easy, Laura. Don't upset yourself, he said. But the tears were already flowing down my cheeks, burning as they traversed my face and dripped off my chin. I shook my head violently, shook it so hard it revived the ache in my neck. No, no, no. I want to be cured now. I want to remember now. Tell me everything. Tell me why I'm like this, I screamed at him. He stood up. Easy, Laura, please. You're just upsetting yourself and making it all much more difficult for us to help you here. I don't want to be here. I want to be... Where do you want to be? I don't even know that, I shouted. I gazed down at my arms, the black and blue marks still vivid. Look at me. What happened? Tell me everything. Please tell me, I begged. And then I rose and looked about the office. Looked for an avenue of escape. I felt like running and running until I couldn't run anymore. He was around his desk instantly and at my side. Laura, relax now. Sit calmly. Come on, he said, putting his hand on my arm, gently but firmly. Megan's terrified face flashed before me. He's the worst, she whispered. Who were these people who knew more than I did and that knew myself but kept it a secret? What was going on? No, I screamed again. I pushed him away, and then I heard a terrible ringing in my head. I pressed my palms to my ears. Someone was shouting, Laura! There was water everywhere, water rushing over me until I couldn't hear my name anymore. No, I cried. Then all went black. I woke up on a gurney in the treatment room, someplace in the building. The walls and the ceiling were stark white. Mrs. Clincher was at my side, and Dr. Sotheby was on the telephone talking softly to someone when I opened my eyes. She's regaining consciousness, doctor, Miss Clincher declared. I started to sit up, but she put her hand on my shoulder. Just relax for a while, she commanded. Doctor. He cradled the receiver and approached. How are you feeling now, Laura? My head hurts, I said with a grimace. The pain felt like a metal band being tightened from one temple to another. We'll give you something for that, he said. What happened? You got too excited, he smiled. You know how a circuit breaker works? I thought, yes, I did know, but I had no idea why. Yes. Well, the mind works in the same way. When it gets overloaded, it shuts down. Now you see why I've got you to get to relax before I can help you, he said. I want you to learn to trust me, Laura. Only then I can help you, and I want to help you, he said firmly. Do you believe me? I nodded, but not with enough confidence to please him. He smiled nevertheless. In time, you will, and then you'll cure yourself, Laura. This is an unfortunate situation, and it won't be long, I promise. Really, he patted my hand. I want to believe him. He was saying these things that I wanted to hear. Sit up now and take this pill, he said, indicating the pill Miss Clincher was waiting to give me. She placed it in my mouth and gave me some water. I drank and swallowed. For now, Dr. Sotheby continued, I'd like you to return to your room and get some more rest, and then we'll talk again. I want to talk now, I insisted. I know you do, but I don't want to chance any recurrences of what just happened. You're very fragile right now, Laura, more fragile than you can imagine. Try and stand up, Laura, she said. I sat up and my head began to spin so rapidly I actually lost my breath, and for a moment I thought I was going to black out again. Easy, easy, Dr. Sotheby said. You better wheel her over, he told Mrs. Clincher. Moments later, they both eased me into the wheelchair. I lay my head back and felt myself being moved out of the treatment room. I kept my eyes closed all the way back to my room. Once there, Mrs. Clincher helped me into bed. Just rest, she said. I'll be back to check on you in a little while. I want to go back to Dr. Sotheby's office and get my treatment, I moaned. I want this to be over. You will go back, she said sternly. But you heard the doctor. He wants you to get rested and stronger. Otherwise, he's just wasting time. And his time is very important. He doesn't only work here with the privileged. He also works at another clinic, too. The privileged. What was the privileged about being here? About being disturbed and sick, I wanted to ask. I tried to open my eyes, but whatever they gave me made my eyelids so heavy. In moments I was asleep. I woke up when I felt my whole body shaking. Megan Paxton was at my bedside, tugging on my hand. She looked at the door and then back at me. "What happened?" I muttered. My eyes felt like cobwebs had been built over them. My eyelids remained glued shut. "They gave you something," she whispered. "You've got to be careful. One of them can come inside here and rape you while you're asleep," she said. "They did that to me. Stay awake," she warned, "or sleep with one eye open." "I'm so tired," I muttered. She looked at me again. "Stay awake," she ordered. "What are you doing in here?" I heard, and I forced my eyelids open enough to see Miss Clinchner in the doorway. "Come out of here immediately, Megan," she commanded, her hands on her hips. "I'm just seeing how she is. What's the big deal? You know you're not supposed to go into anyone else's room without permission from me. Now come out and let her rest, Megan, now," she insisted. "Stay awake," she whispered, and she left. My eyes shut closed again, and when I woke the next time, Megan's presence in my room seemed more like a dream. I felt groggy, but I wanted to get up and move about, so I lifted myself from the bed and went to the bathroom. I washed my face in water as cold as I could get it, and that helped some. When I came out of the bathroom, I found Miss Clincher waiting. "I saw you got yourself up. That's good. How do you feel?" she asked. "Weak, but I don't want to sleep anymore," I added quickly, afraid she had another pill waiting. "Very well. As long as you feel up to it, I'll show you about the facility myself then," she said. "When do I see Dr. Sotheby again?" "Tomorrow," she said. "He had to leave the clinic for other appointments. If you're strong enough, you can go to the recreation room and meet some of the other patients. It's good for you to interact with other people. Dr. Sotheby left strict orders about that. He doesn't want you hibernating in this room." "I don't want to hibernate. I'd like to get some fresh air too," I said. "I'll see that one of the attendants takes you out before dinner," she told me. "Dinner? What about lunch?" I asked. She laughed, a short laugh that sounded like a cough. "You slept through lunch. There's tea and crackers and cookies in the recreation room if you like, and soft drinks in the refrigerator. Come along," she said, and I started after her, my legs not as steady as I would have liked. She noticed and held my arm in the corridor. "Once you move around, get your circulation going, you'll get stronger," she said. "What did you give me? What was that pill?" "It was a light sedative. Dr. Sotheby has prescribed it for you to take at night so you get a good rest." "I don't like those pills," I said. She paused and looked at me. "You remember not liking them, or you just decided?" she asked. "I just don't like them," I said. "Well, we all have to do things we don't like to do once in a while. You're no different just because you can't remember who you are," she commented and led me to the recreation room. There were only 7 patients there, 2 boys who looked about 12 or 13 playing a game of chess, and the rest of the patients sitting and reading or just staring out the windows. Megan and Lulu, the very thin girl, and the good-looking young man I'd seen in the cafeteria were sitting on 2 sofas facing each other with a table between them. There were magazines and books on the table. Lulu was writing feverishly in a long yellow pad and didn't look up as the others did when I entered. On the right, I saw a small stove, a refrigerator, and a sink with some cabinets. "There's hot water for tea there," Miss Clinchner indicated, "and some cookies if you like. Tea bags are in the cabinet, and milk and soft drinks are in the refrigerator." "Thank you," I said. She brought me farther into the room. "This is Mark and Arthur," she said, referring to the 2 boys playing chess. "You 2 remember Laura, don't you?" she asked. They looked up at me, and the back of their chessboard was hardly a smile of a greeting. It was as if nothing more than a breeze had blown by them. You already know Megan Paxton and Edith Saunders," she said, referring to Lulu. This is Mary Beth Lewis and Lawrence Taylor, she added. Mary Beth gave me a warm smile of welcome. Lawrence glanced at me quickly, then looked down. I'll leave Laura with you so you can get to know each other better, she told them, with a mechanical smile. If you need anything, ask Miss Cranshaw, she told me, and nodded at the attendant sitting in the corner reading a magazine. Mrs. Crenshaw gazed our way for a moment, then folded the newspaper and sat back to watch us. I thought it was because of the look Miss Clenchner had given her. She didn't look much younger than Miss Clenchner. In fact, she could easily be older, I thought. Miss Clenchner left us. Sit here, Mary Beth said, moving over on the sofa to make a place for me. Lawrence looked up, but quickly shifted his eyes from mine. Have you remembered your full name? Mary Beth asked. It's Laura Logan, I said. How come you didn't know your own name? Lulu asked, perking up. She's got amnesia, stupid, Megan said. Why do you think she's here? For the food? Or for a stimulating company? Oh, Lulu said, turning to me meekly. I'm sorry. Does it hurt? Not the way you think. It's painful not being able to remember anything, though, I said. Lawrence gazed at me, and a smile softly before looking out the window. Do you know why you have amnesia? Mary Beth asked. If she knew why she wouldn't be here, Megan answered for me. She's right, I don't know, I said. All I know is it's because something terrible happened to me. If that's the case, most everyone here in this place would have amnesia, Megan quipped. Why can't you remember about yourself? Lawrence asked, and then pressed his lips together as if the words had escaped before he could stop them. He had thick eyebrows and dark eyes that flashed with interest before shifting away. Not very much, actually, I said, looking at all of them. Nothing. Nothing, Mary Beth cried. She started to smile. I didn't really remember my full name. Dr. Sotheby told me, I said. Mary Beth stopped smiling. She formed a big O with her lips, and it looked like she had blown a bubble. He wouldn't tell me what happened to me either. He wants me to remember on my own. It's classic, Megan said, as if she were the doctor herself. Once I heard her story, I knew she suffered something terrible, and it was a result of her mind going completely bonkers. Remember that girl they moved to the tower, she continued, the girl who tried to cut her wrist with a broken plate? Every day she couldn't remember what she had done or said the day before. It was as if her mind erased itself the morning to start over. Remember? What was her name? She asked Lawrence. You tried to talk to her all the time. He turned beet red. I didn't try to talk to her all the time, he said, flashing a look at me. Fine, you didn't. It was all my imagination. What was her name? Megan demanded. Lydia, he said quickly. Lydia Becker. Right, Lydia Becker. Every day, we each had to introduce ourselves to her again. It was as if she had just arrived. Remember, Mary Beth? Yes. Megan laughed. I started giving her a different name for myself each time, just to see if it mattered. It didn't. What do you mean? When you said they moved her to the tower, I asked. She's still here, but she's on the top floor. We call it the tower because Megan thinks once you're taken up there, you're shut away for the rest of your life, like in a tower, Mary Beth explained and shrugged. You are? No one who's been brought up there ever comes back to this floor, do they? Megan fired at her. She glared angrily for a moment, then turned to me. You can just imagine what goes on. She could be raped and not even remember it the next day. If they ever wanted to take me up there, I want you all to promise to kill me. Lulu laughed. I mean it, Megan said. I'd rather be dead. She glared at Lawrence, who immediately looked down. Why are you here? I asked Mary Beth. Megan laughed loud and hard. Are you kidding? Why is she here? Look at her. She thinks she's fat. I'm overweight for my size, Mary Beth said. I started to smile, but saw the look on Lauren's face that told me not to. She eats and then throws up, Megan said. One of these days they'll tie her to the bed and shove a tube down her throat. Oh, I'm sorry, I said, not knowing what else to say. I had a feeling words were like footsteps on thin ice here. Go on, ask Lawrence why he's here, Megan taunted. I looked at him. He held my gaze for a brief time and then blushed and looked down at his hands. They looked long and graceful. He had them folded and was twirling his thumbs. Can you guess why he's here? Megan continued. I have no idea, I said. He looks healthy. His eyes shifted to mine, and I thought he smiled, but then I realized he had some sort of face that could easily be deceiving. Was it a smile or a look of pain? As if to answer, he moved his lips slightly, lifted them almost in the corners, brightened his eyes, and fixed them for a second on me. But then, almost as he realized I felt his interest, he shifted away. Was he merely overly shy? That wouldn't be enough to keep someone here, would it? I wondered. Well, Lawrence, tell her what's wrong with you, Megan challenged. Go on. Don't leave her hanging and guessing. He shook his head. Oh, go on, tell her, Megan taunted. It's a sign of improvement when you can talk about your own problems, Megan explained. He glanced at me again, then looked away. I thought his eyes were starting to look a bit teary. Lawrence hasn't made much improvement yet. Young Mr. Tyler, she continued, has what the doctors describe as panic disorder. Don't you, Lawrence? Can't you leave him alone, Mary Beth said. What am I doing to him, Lawrence? Can't you speak for yourself? Yes, Lawrence? Hold it, everyone, Megan said, raising her hands. She turned and looked toward the two boys playing chess. Quiet down over there, Lawrence Taylor. Go on, Lawrence, she said. He looked at me, then he rose quickly, his face flushed. Where are you going? Megan cried. Will you leave him alone? Mary Beth said. Lawrence glanced at me, then hurried out of the recreation room. Megan laughed. Lawrence, she said, is unable to perform today. Everyone gets his money back. That's not nice, I told her. She smirked. As Miss Clinchner says, if we baby each other, nobody gets better. And what's wrong with you then? I demanded, still feeling sorry for Lawrence. Me? I'm unable to have significant relationships. I don't trust anyone. Can I trust you? She asked, her eyes growing watery. Can I trust you? She asked Mary Beth. What about you, Lulu? I'm writing to my father, Lulu said with a smile, telling him about our new friend. Oh, great. Another letter to the dead. I have to go to the bathroom, Megan said, rising. Will everyone please excuse me? She folded her arms over her breasts and walked out. Megan's not a very happy person, Mary Beth said. So she's not satisfied until everyone around her is unhappy too. I can see that, I said. My stomach rumbled. I think I'll have some tea. Would you like some? No, Mary Beth said quickly. I never eat between meals. Tea isn't really eating, I said. I've got to go to my room and get something, she said in a voice of panic. I'll see you at dinner. She rose and left quickly as I got up to go to the stove to pour hot water into a cup with a tea bag. I took one of the cookies and looked at Lulu. She was so sweet and dainty. How could her parents let her be here and not with them, I wondered. When I returned to the sofa, she looked up at me from her notepad. How do you spell acquaintance? She asked me, and I told her. I'm describing you as a new acquaintance, she explained and wrote on. Is that all right? Of course, I said. I like making new friends, and my daddy likes to hear about them. He told me to write a letter every day. Sometimes I write 2 a day, and I have piles and piles of letters from him, she said. Then she paused and put her notepad down and looked at me. I think I'll have a cookie too. When she got up, I leaned over and looked at her pad. I went from surprise to shock and confusion. There wasn't a word written on it, just lines scrawled in every direction. And at Miss Clinchner's directive, Miss Crenshaw took me out to the gardens and walkways to get fresh air. Would you like to stay on the pathway, she said. You can sit on the benches or even the grass under the tree as long as you remain in this area, she added, gesturing at the boundaries. The grounds were beautiful. The beds of flowers, the bird baths, some of the stone marble statuary, a tall, thick oak and maple trees, the hedges. The gardens were all well maintained. A grounds person was weeding in one of the gardens as we walked through. None of the other patients at the clinic were outside as far as I could see. I'd like to just sit here for a while, I said, moving to the wooden bench halfway down the long center path. The sight of the soft clouds and the scent of the grass and the flowers and the touch of the breeze on my face was deliciously familiar. I liked being outdoors. I liked nature. What else did I like? It was strange discovering such basic and simple things about yourself. You have about an hour before dinner, Mrs. Crenshaw said. I have to look after a few other patients and then I'll come and get you when it's time to come in, she said. I thanked her and sat back, watching the two songbirds flit from the bird bath statue of the cherub. They paraded on the small angel's shoulder and then gazed at me before lifting off to fly to the oak tree. It's so quiet, so beautiful and fresh here, I thought. It was a perfect place for recuperation. The only problem was I didn't know from what I was recuperating. And now part of me was afraid to know, afraid to go back. If something so terrifying that it could cause me to forget the most basic things about myself, it must have been horrendous, I thought. Too horrendous for the doctors or nurses to want to tell me. A movement near one of the sprawling oak trees caught my eye, and I turned to see Lawrence Taylor emerge from the shadows and step on the path. He walked slowly with his head down. When he drew closer, he looked up and saw me, and he stopped quickly. "Hi," I said. "It's so pretty out. I wonder why there aren't more people outside." For a second, he looked like he might run off. Then he took a deep breath and replied, "No one comes out here at this time of day. It's too close to dinner," he said. "Everyone usually follows a strict routine here," he added. He looked to his right, then glanced at me as if he had to steal each and every look. "How come you're outside then?" "I like being alone now," he said, "out here." "Why do you like being alone?" He shrugged. "I always have," he said. "Well, not always. I used to be afraid to be alone," he confessed. "That's why they think I'm improving." "Do you have brothers and sisters?" "No," he smiled and looked away. "What's so funny?" I asked. He didn't reply. "Well, I was going to ask you if you did, and then I remembered you don't remember anything," he said. "That's funny?" He looked down. I was angry at first, and then I suddenly laughed. He looked up, a puzzled expression on his face. "Maybe it is funny," I said. "I do feel ridiculous." He held his gaze on me for the longest time, yet then he drew closer. "Dr. Thomas told me that sometimes it's better to laugh than cry," he said. "If you have more of a sense of humor about yourself, you don't take things so seriously and you don't worry as much," he explained. I try to follow his advice, but I still don't laugh all that much. "Sounds like good advice, though," I said. "How long have you been here?" 2 years, he replied. "It seems like forever." 2 years? You didn't go home and come back?" He shook his head. Why can't you go home? You seem fine to me, I said. I wanted to add, unless shyness is now considered an illness. I have these spells. I get chest pains and dizzy, and I start to shake uncontrollably. Why? It's what Megan told you. I have panic disorder, he admitted. I have a very low self-esteem, but as I told you, I'm getting better, he added quickly, as if he were afraid I would be frightened away. At least now I can take walks by myself. It used to be I never left the building. However, he continued, every time I think about leaving the clinic, I break into a cold sweat and feel faint. You want to leave though, don't you? Yes, I'm trying. I really am now. I wasn't trying so much in the beginning. I didn't care that much. Did you always have this panic disorder? No, he said. The whole time he spoke to me, he kept squeezing his right hand with his left and nibbling on his cheek. Why don't you sit here for a while, I suggested. Relax. Tell me what it's like here. I've only been here one night, I explained. He looked in the space beside me on the bench as if it were a high hurdle he could never reach. I don't bite, I said. Or at least I don't think I do. I don't remember biting people, but maybe I did, I added, tilting my head and pretending to think about it. Since I can't remember, I can't swear I didn't. I might even be a killer. He smiled. See? I have a sense of humor, I told him. He widened his smile, and then with a sudden, abrupt, definite move, like someone charging into fire, he sat beside me. You really can't remember anything? Nothing? He asked. When we spoke, he avoided looking directly at me for more than a fleeting second. When he did look at me, I could see the sensitivity in his dark eyes. His pupils looked like two shiny black pearls. They made me think of another face, but I saw only the eyes in my memory, and then when I saw the mouth, the eyes faded. I have these flashes, pictures, sounds, but as soon as I try to understand them, to trace them back to something, they disappear, I complained. What's an example? What do you see? Here, he asked with interest. Water, the beach, boats, but little boats, toy boats. You mean like model boats? Yes, model boats. But it makes me shiver even now, even in the sunlight, to think about boats, I said and hugged myself. My teeth actually chattered. Very tentatively, inches at a time, he reached out to touch my hand. You are cold, he said, impressed. I nodded, and he wrapped his hand around mine. That feels good, I said, smiling. He smiled and held onto my hand. The longer he held onto it, the more confident he became. Well, what do we have going on here? We heard, and Lawrence let go of my hand as if it had shocked him. We turned to see Megan coming toward us. She marched stiffly with her hands clenched at her sides and her arms unbending. Hi, Megan, I said. I wondered where you were when I came back. Lulu said that you asked to go outside. Isn't this cozy, she added, looking from Lawrence to me and then back at Lawrence. You don't know each other 5 minutes, and you rendezvous in the garden, and I find you guys holding hands. Lawrence moved away from me quickly. We bumped into each other out here. I didn't know Lawrence was outside. Really, she said, her eyes narrow with suspicion. How'd you get him to let you hold your hand? He didn't get me to let him, Megan. I told him I was cold, and he was just trying to warm me up, I said. Sure, that's how it starts, she said. I'm surprised at you, Lawrence Taylor. You haven't touched another person since I've known you. You must be someone special, she said to me. Lawrence's face was crimson, but his lips were white with fear. He shook his head. The male in you was woken, Megan declared, like a doctor diagnosing a terminal illness. I'll warn the girls and the female attendants and the rest of the world. Everyone should know and be on guard. Lawrence Taylor lusts have been miraculously resurrected. His hormones are raging. Beware. No, Oh, stop it, she snapped and then looked around. When she turned back on us, her expression was completely different. I have a private secret place I'll show you later, she told me. If you're good, however, I hope you're not like Lydia and forget everything every day. I really don't like wasting my time on people. I don't think that's my problem, forgetting things I learn, I said. You don't know what your problem is. That's your problem, she replied. Look at him, she continued, nodding at Lawrence. Pathetic. I turned and saw that he was trembling and the sweat had broken on his brow. Lawrence, I said, and reached out to touch him. I'm okay. I think it's time to go in for dinner. He stood up. I didn't mean anything. It's all right, Lawrence, really, I said. Please stay with us. He looked at Megan. Yeah, Lawrence, we're hungry for your warm company. I'll see you inside. He glanced at me and turned away. I've got to do something before dinner, he added, and walked toward the building. I wonder what that could be, Lawrence, Megan called after him. What could you do all alone in your room? I hope it's not what I think it is. I hope you're not like the other boys your age, what they do with themselves. Her words and laughter made him walk faster. Why do you pick on him like that? I demanded. He was doing so well. She looked at me as if I spoke another language. I don't pick on him. I don't pick on anybody. She paused, making her eyes smaller. And you're siding with them already. You're just here and you're siding with them, she accused. With whom? With whom? She mimicked. You better be careful, she warned. You just better be careful. First thing is they win your trust, and then her lips trembled and her chin quivered. She had her hands clenched into fists and her arms were extended against her sides again. She looked like a soldier frozen in place. Megan, are you all right? Her eyelids fluttered, and then she looked at me and relaxed. Of course I'm all right. I have to be all right. I have to be sharp, aware. I'm going back inside. I've got to get Lulu. She doesn't know enough to get herself to dinner. She keeps waiting for her daddy. Her daddies, she spit as if it were profanity. She should be happy he never comes around. She turned and walked after Lawrence. Why did she hate daddies?